Welcome traders. In this video we're going to go over the trades from Monday, October 7th, and we're going to look at the classifications of those trades, and then we're going to look in replay mode and use Bloodhound and Blackbird to enter a trade. And that's going to illustrate a couple of things. Basically, it's going to illustrate the numbers and the classification systems in real time, and how you would go about setting up Blackbird as it is right now to successfully get that trade entered. So yesterday saw a bunch of really interesting trades and really good trades. So we'll start off, and on the open we had this buy back here, but there wasn't any good classification. We only had a single green in front of it, and that was looking at a distribution. So this is something that is not clear and wouldn't be taken. We then followed that up into a very clear trade. We had a strong trend reversal here, giving us a very good trade. We would not be looking at this long exhaustion pattern here because of all of the red on the chart, including the red on the chart from that move down itself. Now what becomes very interesting here is a series of accumulations that began occurring between 9:47 going into the next hour. And basically what was occurring in this period is something that I've talked about before, and that is that the market here was under an accumulation, and the ZoneTraderPro software in two different ways caught that perfectly. So here we see that we had both a double red and a black. Now the double red means that the high to the low number here, the KP2, was very high, and the low to the low number, which is the actual cumulative delta, was also high. But what they were doing here is the limit order ratio was a 102, and that gives us the black classification. And so that's something that we would have to worry about if we were going to go short from right here. Now, being that this is a pattern, we want to understand that if we were truly in a strong trend, we should have seen the reaction right here. And this is something I've talked about in other videos. When price is trading up to here, that is a very poor risk, because what we will be doing is trading into a broken reversal pattern, which we eventually do get right there. So this would be, even with the red that we have right there, because of the black and because of just the pattern itself, where we're only going to look to get probably 1.5 or 2 points, this is a very poor risk to take. Now here we see that we have a green and a black. The green is from the number of contracts that were bought back, and that is showing us the strength that we have. And we have about the same ratio, 103, and that's why we get the black right here. Now that is going to be some kind of concern here going into this long trade where we have the bloodhound signal. But when we look here, we are being shown that there's accumulation in two different ways. First, we're being shown that the software is picking up the accumulation here, and that software is basically picking that up based upon the market orders in the cumulative delta. Now, in a completely separate measure, the ratio down here, the 165, is telling us that the limit orders are under accumulation also. We're being given two different accumulation signals down here, and we have a very high probability trade of a broken reversal. So even though we have red down here, we can justify getting into this trade because the market orders from here to here, what was giving us the red, were under significant accumulation. So as we can see, that trade worked very well, and we entered a second accumulation trade here. And again, we have exactly the same setup where we're looking at our previous trade and we're saying that the KP2 from here to here was red, and on the pullback we again see that there was a high enough number to give us both a KP2 and a KP3 red bar here. But again, those contracts that were coming down were being absorbed, and we can see that in the negative 115 KP2 ratio. So again, we had a good trade here. We had valid order flow on the 4 range chart to get us into this trade. Now here at 1033, we have two types of divergence getting us short. And basically we have special divergence here, and we have normal divergence at the same point. So we have an excellent short trade opportunity that nets us 5 points and is well worth taking. From there, we again have the exact same setup as we did before. The hard selling was absorbed into here, and they went and they absorbed even more contracts, this time on limit orders, giving us a negative 130. The other thing that I want to point out is that once we entered this pattern right here, the market was trading between the red and the greens with an emphasis to the long side, as these two resistance zones were both broken through. But what you need to be aware of, and this is something I've talked about in other videos, is when we are going between red and green looking like a Christmas tree, you need to be aware that this is a consolidation and we are going to form a strong trend, which is what we did. And coming out of that trade, price traded over 10 points higher. Just a quick note, I realize that there is some audio interference on this microphone, and I have a replacement coming which should be here in the next couple of days. So I realize that, and I apologize, and we'll try to take some of it out in the editing process. Okay, the next thing we have here is we have a strong trend trade where we had greens going into it, and that again traded into a special divergence, which we want to be extremely careful of, and led to an excellent reversal. So on the special divergence, we see that we had a significant negative KP3 number here, and that is what gave us our red here. But as we look at the KP2 from this point of 48.75 to the sell signal, we see that our KP2 number, which is the delta from the low to the high, was a negative 1148 contracts. And this is why when you see a number that's this high on this special divergence, if you were in this long trade, which there's nothing to keep you out of, there's no reason not to be doing it. If you were in that long trade, when you saw that the KP2 here was giving us a negative 1148, and now the cumulative delta from this point, from the apex back here, was now a negative 2100, really good reason to get out of that trade and go short. Here we have a long trade that we didn't have anything preceding it, so that is a trade that we may have passed on. However, on the following trade, we have double greens and we have a standard trend trade here, all real good. We have the exact same setup here. Now, what we are looking at here is that we can see that on each time that price traded higher into the blue counter trend zone, we are going to be worried about, we do need to be worried about the KP2 ratio, that they're getting rid of contracts on limit orders. So while these are still very good trades, we need to be aware of that, especially in this second trade here, where we were initially given a special divergence basically at the high right there, and we should be taking that into consideration. As that sold off, we're giving a single red here into this trend trade. Again, excellent trade. Again, we are given a second trend trade here. However, that is trading into a broken reversal. And again, what we need to be looking at here is the fact that we did have black down here, and we had formed a strong trend here, taking us into the trend trade. And for exactly the same reasons as before, we need to be aware of this broken reversal. So we have the broken reversal trade here, but we don't have any classification going into it. So both of these trades are probably something that would best be left alone. The next really good trade here is this special divergence pattern that we have right here, giving us about a 3-point trade that traded into an accumulation pattern along with a trend trade. And even though the price classification is double red down here, we again see that we were accumulating both on limit orders and we were accumulating on market orders also, giving us an excellent trade. From there, the market entered a very steep sell-off, and we had several opportunities for taking short trades. Our first was from here, and again, we are somewhat worried about the accumulation from down here. However, that trade worked out fine. Again, this trade had special divergence on it, going into another strong trend pattern, followed by a third strong trend pattern and a fourth strong trend pattern. Now, the strong trend patterns basically end here, and what do they end with? Well, they end with a green classification down here, following this black limit order accumulation signal here. So with that, we have an exhaustion trade, and even though this isn't green, we can rely on this now to be our support in going forward. And we see that the exhaustion pattern worked perfectly. Going into the next trade, we again have a trend trade here where we've had double green here. So we would not be looking to take the broken reversal short. Then we had a trend trade long here where we had double green and green going into that. And then we entered again another sell-off pattern where we had an excellent short here, followed by a second excellent short here. The whole purpose of this classification system would be to ignore this exhaustion pattern here, because it's not going to get us anywhere. It's only going to get us about 4 or 5 ticks of favorable excursion before trading into the trend trade and trading down. And basically the same thing right here. It got us after the entrance. If we'd entered it, we got very few ticks favorable before it came back to take us out. So that is, of course, the whole purpose of this classification system. Here again, we see the exact same pattern that we saw about an hour ago, where we had a double red classification, except that we had black here. And again, it's not unusual to see that as price trades into the strong trend area, that we're going to get this additional black here as the sellers come in on limit orders and try to reverse it. However, the cumulative delta is now giving us a green with our exhaustion pattern, and we again see an excellent 5-point trade, and that takes us basically into the end of the day. So all in all, that was a great day of trading, particularly if you were following the classification system, and by following the classification system we stayed out of anything that was going to hurt us. As far as the update to the software goes, I had a bug that I found yesterday, submitted this back to the programmer, and he has taken care of that, and I'm still waiting on a second piece of software that I want to include in the update from the programmer. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I am going to illustrate two of the trades taken that are going to show all the capabilities of the software in both the divergence and the classification system. So the first trade I want to illustrate is this one here that occurred at approximately 13:35 hours, 13:36 hours. And the second trade is this short trade right here where we had special divergence and a strong trend pattern. Now, in order to set up BlackBird to take these trades, I'm going to open a new chart and select this, and I'm going to move the tick value down to only 50, and I'm going to uncheck tick replay. Now this is very important, and I'll explain a little bit more later, but what we want to do is we want to have basically a blank chart with a very small tick value, and it is super important that you do not engage tick replay for BlackBird. So we'll go ahead and load that chart. Now, in order to load the BlackBird strategy, we're going to come to the strategies, find BlackBird, we're going to enable it, and we're going to choose the demonstration file that I've created here and say OK. BlackBird will take a few seconds to load. Next, what we want to do is we want to load the yesterday's data. If you've never done that before, you need to first disconnect from any connections here. So we come to the Tools menu and Historical Data. We want to click the Load tab down here. We select the December 19 instrument. We select October 7th, and we just click Download. And it's a very fast process to get the data. The next thing we do is we want to come up to the connections, and we want to connect to the playback connection. Once everything has loaded back up, we only want to see the one day, so we're going to come here, change the date to October 7th, and then we want to fast forward our slider to approximately 1300 hours. Okay, I've gone and advanced the slider to the time that we're going to be looking for. So that'll take a minute or two to load to get there. While this is loading, what I want to talk about is the reason that we're putting this on a 50 tick chart and having the trading chart off to the right. After talking with Bloodhound, I found out that what we want for optimally trading BlackBird is we want a very clean file, and in order to get that, what we would need to do is we would need to take our logic file, open it up, and we would want to get rid of any unused solvers that we have right here, and then we would want to get rid of all of our logic that is not needed here. And in order to do that, you actually have to get rid of the logic templates first. So we would want to go back in. All of these other logic templates would need to be deleted. So make sure if you have something that you have created that you take the file, make a copy of it, and that copy will be renamed to something that you understand, and that would be the only thing in here. So we would want to first get rid of all of our logic templates, and then get rid of all the solvers that are not being used over here. And that will optimize the Bloodhound file. Now, the second reason that we're doing this is because during my testing, I found out that we wanted the bar to close over here in order to trigger the BlackBird entry strategy. So that's why we are putting this on the chart all by itself. We don't need anything else. Okay, once everything has loaded, all we're going to do is start the playback here. And we don't want to go too fast, because if we go past it, it will take some time to get everything reloaded. So we can control the speed. We want to get up to about 1330 hours. So we'll put it there and just let Market Replay do its work. Okay, with the charts all set up, let's take a quick look at the BlackBird settings. We come down to order settings down here. And what I am trying to do is I'm trying to accomplish both a limit order entry and a market order entry. So what we have to do first is we have to tell it what logic file we're looking at. So we're looking at the ZTP order flow logic file, and then the entry signal is the ZTP order confirmation file with no look back. Then I'm telling it to give me a limit order, and I'm telling it to place that limit order at -1, because during my testing I was seeing that the limit order was getting filled at the same price as the market order. And then I want a profit target of 10 and a stop loss of 10. These numbers are not meant to be any suggestion as to a profit target or strategy. They're only there for illustrative purposes. For the market entry, same way. We're just going to place the market order immediately, and we are looking for a profit target of 10 and a stop loss of 10. Now, what's going to happen is when this gets filled, we're going to have ChartTrader on here, and we can adjust as necessary using ChartTrader. So with the chart all set up, on the right hand side, okay, I have the charts all set up, and as a reminder of what we're going to see, we're first going to see a regular divergence trade followed by a special divergence trade. And for those trades, we're not going to be using BlackBird, because Bloodhound and BlackBird do not pick up the divergence signals. They only pick up the price patterns and the order flow patterns. So I'm going to go ahead and start the replay. It will be playing at regular speed. You will see that the numbers, the KP2, the KP3, and the ratio are updating in real time up there. You see that we didn't receive any order flow or price pattern signal on the trend trade there, and now we're going to trade a little lower into the divergence. So we see that divergence right there. And next we're going to be trading into the special divergence. Now, what we're looking for on the order flow chart is we're looking for the creation of an extension zone. and you see that what happened, I'm going to pause it right here. What happened is the algorithm became non-divergent at the intermediate resistance zone, and then you see that it recomputed as it traded higher. In other words, there was a significant amount of selling coming in before the price reached its apex there, and that's what gave us our signal once again. Now what we see is we see the entry signal over on the order flow chart that we're looking for, and there what we wanted to see was we wanted to see the creation of this extension zone right here. It's very common in probably about 80% of the trades that we see the creation of an extension zone, and this is what's really amazing: one tick from the high or one tick from the low. So in this case we created that extension zone one tick from the high. The other two things to note are these red boxes right here. These red boxes are showing absorption, and that's actually a better signal that we would prefer to see, but we don't see that as often. We see the order flow creating the extension zone more often, and like I said, in about 80% of the time we get that as a trading signal. In the previous bullish divergence, we got the extension created, but it wasn't created until almost 4 ticks higher in the price. I'm going to go ahead and start market replay once again, and this is going to take us down into the accumulation trade, which is also the reversal pattern. So for that, what we're going to want is we're going to want BlackBird to engage the trade. And again, we're going to do this at normal speed. So we see we now have the accumulation showing. And what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to click long disabled to allow us to take a long trade. The other thing we can see is in the live number, the live ratio was increasing during that period. And that's what we want to see. The live ratio is now up to 135. And you see that updating as price traded one tick lower right here. Now we did get a second entry signal based on order flow. However, since we're already in the trade, we don't have to do anything. It's going to take care of that for us. We have our target up here at 29.58 and a quarter. In real time, what you would have been looking for in order to gauge that as a trade is you would have been looking at the real-time numbers increasing. I think they started around a 50, and then they were steadily increasing to over 100, and where they ended up with at 126. With the number now at 20, well, what that is telling us is that there's not a lot of sellers out there willing to take positions on limit orders. And there we have our order filled for the first of the two trades. I want to do a quick illustration right here as we approach the second short trade that we're going to look at. You can see how in real time, when we received the exhaustion signal to go long, that the bar classification had been double red on both of those before receiving the long signals, thus keeping us out of the long exhaustion pattern. We're now approaching the trade, and as you can see in real time, the classification system upgraded the bars, now showing us two reds, and the ratio had turned to over 95, giving us the black bar going into this short trade. Now, in a strong trend, what we expect to see is selling coming from the area of minor resistance. And if that doesn't happen from minor resistance, that's telling us something is broken, and that's going to lead us to the broken reversal trade. However, in this instance, we're going to trade back to minor. We're going to receive a red classification, and then we're going to engage the BlackBird indicator to go short. Again, we're running at normal speed here. We can see in real time how the KP2 and KP3 numbers have given us significant selling. We're going to have our little pullback right here into the minor zone and wait for our classification. And remember, this is also going to give us a special divergence pattern also. I'm going to speed this up just a little. Okay, we've now formed our new zones along with special divergence, and what makes this trade extremely attractive was, of course, that we are in a downtrend, we're in a strong trend, but we received the special divergence signal there. I've turned it back down to regular speed, and I've gone and engaged the BlackBird short enabled, and we'll just let this play out now. you see that we now have our first market order filled. We're trying to get our limit order filled, and we now have both orders being filled. In this case, we got a better price on the limit order, so we'll go ahead and use ChartTrader to move both of our targets down to the original 10 tick mark. We can also tighten up the stop. And from here, I'm just going to increase the speed a little to speed this up. One of the things that you did, of course, notice is that by using these settings, which I have to enter intra-bar, we got fills as soon as the order flow bar had completed, giving us an excellent price and a successful trade. Well, I want to thank you for watching the video, and if you have any questions, of course, please be sure to give me a call, and have a good day.